Hey, so over the holidays, I've been playing through a couple of games that I really enjoy, like some Mario 3 and some Doom, and of course a bunch of Quake. And I thought it'd be fun to play through the first episode of Doom and do kind of a commentary playthrough about some of the level design stuff. So this is E1M1, which has been kind of talked to death, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, or try not to. I am playing on Hurt Me Plenty, and also with this playthrough, I'm not going to try and do like 100% secrets or anything like that. I'm going to try and play basically the critical path, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. So yeah, first thing, classic horseshoe shape, which Romero's talked about in like there's a really good playthrough that he did with JP Le Breton with Double Fine. Um, and they played through the first episode talking about it and Romero's thinking on a lot of the levels. So I'd really recommend watching that. Yeah, it's a horseshoe shape, and you get windows to basically see into the next area. Okay, so this is kind of a door fight, which I've talked about with some combat design stuff where I open up the door and they're the enemies. Um, like, since these are hit scanners, there's not a lot of opportunity to push up and get aggressive without taking damage. It's kind of an attrition fight. But it's okay. It's not a big deal. I think a better version of it is like this corner here. The soft angle on it lets me kind of take the fight piece by piece rather than fighting from the door itself. Other thing here that helps is that the imp, this is our first introduction to an imp on Hurt Me Plenty at least. The imp is leashed on that platform up there, so I can only deal with it by pushing forward like this. I have to get aggressive. Um, the other thing is that there's this zigzag pattern in the floor, which means that the former human soldier there has this very long path to get to me. And it's basically like there's a clock running down. As soon as he sees me, he's going to start pushing my position, but he's going to do it very slowly because of the zigzag pattern. And that gives me time to deal with this guy safely from this corner, if I'm playing conservatively, and then deal with this guy. Or since this guy's a fireball guy, I could push up, trust I'm able to dodge the fireballs, and deal with the hit scanner first. So even though like this is a really basic encounter that's introducing this imp kind of alongside the former human that we saw in the previous room, it gives us some kind of target priority. Do I deal with this guy first, or do I deal with this guy first? Now this is fun because we get the flashing lights, which are so cool. It's one of the best things about Doom. And now like the imp, just thinking from a thematic perspective, we've got this thing that we can't quite see in the distance. Imagining, playing this on a CRT 800 by 600 resolution, like that's a couple pixels that's shooting a fireball at me. It's basically a turret as far as I can tell. Um, but I push up and now I see one up close, but it's still bathed in shadow and the lights are flickering, and it's kind of a terrifying introduction to this enemy. And we also have the explosive barrel. The first room has some explosive barrels, so I could have played with them there and found out, oh, that's what they do. And if I'd learned that lesson, then I could have used the explosive barrel to kill the imp. We also have the fenced walls on the sides. In Hurt Me Plenty, we don't have enemies here, but on ultraviolence and higher difficulties, we have enemies in these pockets. And this behaves as kind of another leash, where if I want to deal with these guys, I have to stick my head out. I have to fight from within the room rather than from the door. And like if I fight from here, then there's a risk being shot in the back, being shot in the front. It's I'm in a crossfire. So it'd be better still if I push up like this and can start using these pillars against these guys. So that I think is a really good example of using the level geo to encourage the players to push into the room rather than fighting from the doors. Okay, so now that we're into the second map, I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time than I did on the first one. We'll see though. So there are a couple different kind of ideas of how you can do enemy placement. One of the ideas is kind of encounter design of there's a kind of set experience that I want to create for the player, and the enemies are there as part of creating that experience, creating those emotions. But another idea that I think is more common to the way that Doom and Quake work is um, a sort of cleaning up mindset. And I think Romero's described it this way in some of the talks he's given, where it's like I need to clean something up, and there are these monsters that are, it's basically dust that I'm sweeping away, except that they push back against my attempt to clean it up. And like as a result, it means that when I get to the end of a map and I've done a good job cleaning it, I get the progression markers, how many enemies I killed, how many items, stuff like that. It feels kind of like Pac-Man in a way. You're just cleaning up, carving out a space. So with a lot of the enemies, it's not like how is this enemy creating a specific challenge for me to overcome, or how's this enemy creating an encounter or a set of emotions. It's more a lot of kind of filler enemies, and that's not really a bad thing. When you call it filler, it sounds bad, but it's well, we'll see some more of it. So one thing that I also like about this is that it's a nice centralized hub space, and right away we don't have a clear idea of what our goals are. The first map is very linear, so you just keep going towards enemies, and if you do that, you're succeeding. But here, you have to explore a bit and find out, red door, oh, I need a red key. You've got the elevator platforms, I already got the shotgun from one of those. Little dead end. So here's another crossfire. And there we see the red key. So it's not like there was such a long time between us seeing the red door and the red key. It's also possible, I could have just gone straight for the red key and not seen the door, and I'd get the red key and go, oh, okay, I guess I need to find a red door. So it's a very small kind of loop that we've got around this hub space. But it is our second level, so it's not trying to be too complicated. So now, interesting thing here, critical path is this way. Now I can just keep going here through critical path to the exit. Like I don't need to get any more keys or anything like that. But there is a side room that'll open up here, I think. If I go into this other side room, find this button, push it, I hear the door opening sound. And now there's a door here, and I just love this space and the way that the light and shadow create these really dramatic lines. This is a scary space to fight in because you can't quite see the guys, and who knows where they'll be popping around the corners. This kind of structure is really maze-like, and it's very Wolfenstein 3D. But like having the different textures on the walls that differentiate this from the other space, and like the stuff it's doing with the lighting is just so cool. Like the pulsing going on here. It's much easier to landmark, much easier to navigate, but it is still very maze-like, very flat, very blocky. But it works pretty well, I think. Yeah, it's the secrets, but I'm not going to pay too much attention to them on this playthrough. But yeah, that whole thing was just like kind of a red herring path. It's not critical path. Um, I think there's another one here. Yeah. Yeah, and this would give us a preview of there's a chainsaw. Um, and this one I think is probably a little bit more obvious. So maybe we encounter this first. We see that chainsaw. We say, ooh, I want to get that chainsaw. Ooh, there's a button that probably lowers it. And there's a door over here. How do I get to that? And I'd look at the auto map and try and figure out how to get there. Um, but like it's all optional. I don't have to do any of that stuff. And I think that's a very kind of interesting quality of Doom level design that I don't know if it's overlooked, but like even going from Doom to Quake 1, Quake 1's a lot more linear in its structure of locks and keys. There's a lot less of these kind of optional side areas, or if they are, they're very clearly marked as a secret area. So I really like this fight. The platforms are kind of an awkward thing in Doom. Um, I feel like the platforms tend to be used as a way of solving what I've described as the door problem of fighting from the door frame. You step on the platform, it lowers you into the arena, and you have no choice but to fight. But as we saw there, the platform then started rising back up, and it basically ended up being kind of a slower version of a door fight. Also worth noting on higher difficulties, you have some enemies on the ledges around here, which makes this fight a whole lot harder. I believe it's mostly imps, so it's mostly projectiles. So you have this, again, prioritization choice of hit scanners or projectile guys. Um, and in this case, I think hit scanners probably take priority. But yeah, the platforms are interesting. You see it a couple times. I think we've seen it one other time already. But I do think it'd probably work better if it was just a straight drop down, and then through some action in the arena, you open up a shortcut teleport, or you open up, or you turn it into a platform that rises and lowers, like the platform starts disabled. Um, but it's always tricky because then, this comes as a bit of a surprise here for the player. Like, oh dang, there's this fight, and if it's clearly marked as a drop down, that kind of tells the player, hey, you're about to have a fight, and it's less of a surprise. So I believe also on harder difficulties, pushing that button and opening these side doors creates access for another wave of monsters. Um, and this really short loop is kind of a nice expansion of the arena. But again, I plan on Hurt Me Plenty, which is kind of the normal difficulty. I know at least with my first playthrough of Doom, Hurt Me Plenty was the difficulty I played on. And I think for a lot of people, when the game came out, Hurt Me Plenty would have been like kind of the standard difficulty. But it's of course easier as a result. Okay, anything else to say about this one? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Okay, so Toxin Refinery. I really like this one. So again, we've got this kind of leash structure with the fences that keeps the monsters back. They do have access routes through these winding kind of loops around the space, which does mean that they will get to me. It just takes them a while. So it's kind of like I'm on a clock. There's a kind of time pressure created by this setup. Also, it's just a little bit of exploration. I see that I've got a blue door, and I need a blue key for that. So I've already got a goal set in my mind that I need to find a blue key. Very conspicuous barrel set in the middle there. So, if I haven't already seen those, I think the barrels, I know it's kind of a video game cliche to have explosive barrels, but they're a fun way of mixing up the target prioritization because, hit scan versus projectile, but hey, if I wait a second, maybe I can get these guys to group around the barrel, and that will be more effective. Also interesting, this is all the levels so far have been John Romero levels, and Romero really likes his windows, looking into other spaces and kind of teasing at cool things. Ooh, look at that armor. Ooh, look at that button. Ooh, look at that. What is that? That looks cool. Again, though, interesting thing. All this area I'm looking at right now, I believe, is optional. Like it's not critical path. So another case here. They aren't really leashed, but again, you've got a longer than normal path. Like it's not a straight line path, so it's going to take them a while to get to me. And also, the way it forces them to split up around that space is kind of interesting. Means that like one of the effective things you can do that you probably saw me doing in this space is trying to get them to line up so that they will hit each other if they shoot, and potentially my shots will hit multiple of them depending on how they're lined up. Versus like if I've got three guys, standing abreast, then I can take damage from all three of them, and I probably can't hit all three of them. And creating little divisions in the path like this, or even like this pillar does, I think helps with preventing them from going in single file. So this is another kind of 50-50 corner, is like what you call it in Counter-Strike, where if I peek my head out, I have to check both these corners simultaneously, and that's not possible, so I have to make a 50-50 bet on where the enemies are. Oh, and since it's Doom, I might be in trouble now. Yeah, it's okay. We can start over. Yeah, so I've got to worry about both these corners. Also, with the way they use the explosive barrels here, it's really nasty. If I'm a little too trigger happy, I might accidentally shoot that barrel when I'm peeking this corner, and then that's a pretty big explosion that I've got to worry about. So again, this is just kind of a nice like L-shaped threshold to that fight, which I think feels a lot smoother than if this was actually a door that opened and closed. That I might get stuck on one side of it and I'd feel bad. Or if the door opened in this way, then I'd probably just open the door, shoot, back off. But with it being a corner into the space, it feels better to me. And with this kind of ambush, this kind of ambush makes sure that I'm actually in the arena space and not fighting from a threshold, whether it's a door or a corner. I think in this case, like because it's imps and because of projectiles, that it feels fine. But like if this was Doom 2 and that was a chain gunner that popped out, or like an archvile, that could be kind of mean. Because there's not a lot of cover. And probably like the optimal thing to do then would be to back off and again wait for it to come around the corner, which you'd struggle to do because of it would just play bad. Other thing there though that's really fun is just the change of the lights is always really cool. I like all the light dynamics are just such a fun thing about Doom. Yeah, so I'm going to skip the side room stuff. I believe our first encounter, so if I push this button, that'll open a path here, that'll go to a side room, and I believe that'll be our first encounter on Hurt Me Plenty with a Pinky Demon. Um, but it's an optional area. We don't have to go that way, which means that our first encounter happens, I think, 2 maps later. Actually, maybe next map, because this is, yeah, E1, M3, so it's going to be E1, M4 that it happens on. Yeah, so just a nice little loop of the space here. It's kind of an artificial choice since both of them go to the same spot, but it's nice to be able to peek and chip away at the guys, peek from a different angle, have them readjust their aim. It's nice to have that option. Also, sometimes it's interesting to think about what would the space be like if this whole floor was flat, if there wasn't this pit of toxin in the middle. What is the toxin doing for this space? I think part of it is, again, if I waited for these enemies to come to me, then they kind of filter in through these lanes, which makes them a little bit easier to control. But also I have to stick to these lanes, which reduces my options. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure. If this was flat, would it just be maybe it'd just be boring? Um, but yeah, it's interesting to think about. With a lot of this stuff about the way the level's shaped, it's not some exact science of, oh, it must be this way, or everything must have been designed for some perfect reason. It may be a consequence of, there are a million different reasons why it could be. Also, now that we entered that room, there's kind of a sound cue secret over to the side area. But it could just be that this is trying to build up the theme of being a toxin refinery. For it to be a toxin refinery, you need some toxin, so that's what it's here for. One thing I also really like is this kind of pattern. We're going to see it a couple times throughout the episode, but it's a very symmetrical space, pulsing lights, and exit door centered, and staircase going up to elevated platform. Yeah, we're going to see it a couple times here. I guess more specific there, the thing I like about that kind of space is that it creates a visual language that, when reinforced through repetition, becomes a pattern, and then the maps can toy with that pattern and kind of subvert expectations. But in order to have those subversions, you have to first create them. So yeah, we're going to see that a bit. Okay, so now this map's really interesting to think about. This is E1M4 command control. And this is a Tom Hall level that Sandy Peterson finished. So it's very different from a Romero mindset. And already we can see I've got a lot of choices here. I could go to this left path, I could go to this middle path, I could go to the right path. And also I don't have any clear, in the level so far, it usually doesn't take long for me to find a locked door or a key. And from there I can kind of form a goal of, I need to find the other corresponding part, the door or the key, so I can proceed along the critical path. And here, I don't have a clue. I just have to start exploring. Yeah, and here we have very classic Sandy Pearson, barrels of fun, chain reactions of the barrels. It's such a fun consequence of the way the explosive barrels work. The explosion has some knockback on them, and the explosive barrel has a period of waiting before it actually explodes and does damage, which means you get these chain reactions that almost feel like billiard balls bouncing around. And there's something really, really fun and satisfying about that. I think it's similar seeing dominoes fall over. Why is that fun? I'm not sure, but there's something just seeing causality play out is really satisfying. So I really like this space as well. I think with Doom abstract level design, it's often easy to get confused and lost. And like if you compare Wolfenstein 3D, where it's very maze-like and all orthogonal walls, it's really easy to get lost and turn around. But a space like this has a very strong, recognizable shape to it, and becomes a very clear landmark. And also, it makes a really nice fight because I open up the doors, I get some monsters inside, and I can swing around the space as the monsters start spilling out into this wider arena. And on harder difficulties, when you've got more monsters in here, that becomes a really dynamic fight around this whole space. Now the awkward thing here is I've kind of stumbled into the blue key, and I haven't seen a blue door anywhere. So now I'm kind of at a loss of where even is my goal. I'm still kind of in this hunting mindset. The other thing here is that this is something that Doom and Quake 1 in particular struggle with a bit, is that when the key is part of like a combat arena and you're able to pick it up during the combat arena, you might just strafe through it and not even notice that you've picked up the key. I think that's what happened on my first time playing this back in the day. And I had no idea that I had a key, so I was still exploring and was just kind of operating blind. The downside of not having a door, like a blue key door that I already know about, is that I don't have a lot of intentionality to how I'm exploring the space. I'm just kind of wandering. But when I have a clearer like lock and key kind of structure, like you see with Quake 1 maps, especially with Episode 1's maps, then it's really easy to have this kind of intentionality of, oh, I need to, that's my goal, I'm doing this, and I don't spend a lot of time lost or confused. But I do think like there's kind of an aesthetic to this uncertainty, and it's tricky because being lost or like finding out that you've gone into a dead end area that's kind of a red herring, not critical path, this can be kind of frustrating. Like, why is the level making me do this stuff? But if you approach the level assuming that it's antagonistic, that this is kind of a living system that I'm exploring and trying to carve out a path through, then I think it's easier to appreciate this more obtuse, like my first goal is to find a goal, right? I've got to find a door or a key and figure out, like, does this door even matter? Does this key, is this like an optional side path? Like this room here, I don't need to go into, but I don't know that. All right, so here would be potentially my first pinky encounter if I hadn't seen it previously. I think though, probably the way you're meant to encounter this guy isn't here because, you know, a pinky at range is a melee only character. It's like, it can't do anything here. Which I guess makes it kind of a safe introduction, but I think what's intended is for me to encounter them in here. One thing though is that, again, first time playing this level, I got pretty lost. And I think part of it is, you know, a room like this is kind of unremarkable and hard to think about because it's so asymmetric and so, like, what even is this space? And like for this door to be really important, you know, it's a critical path door and it's tucked off to the side. And I may not even see it, like, oh, I'm looking over here. Oh, I'm going up the stairs. Okay, I cleared the room, right? You know, like if this door was front and center, I think that would make it pop a bit more. So there's this balance of the kind of antagonistic ecosystem and design I'm talking about, and also like, does this friction add anything, right? So this kind of space here is very Wolfenstein 3D. I mean, you've got the floor up and down stuff that makes it different from Wolfenstein 3D. But I believe this would be our first encounter on critical path, at least, with the pinkies. And it's a really good setup for facing them because it's close combat, a lot of sharp corners where you can't be sure if there's a monster around them, and that means they can get right up in your face and be basically the most threatening version of themselves possible, like that. All right. Okay, so now here's kind of an odd thing because what I actually need for the critical path is to push this button, which raised a platform on the other side of this door. And you can hear it, but it's possible to, I didn't, but it's possible to go around through the door on the other side and see that space. And also, like, I could do that loop back around right now without getting the gold key and show you that space. And like the gold key's just kind of a convenience, I guess, to create this shortcut back to this room. So that's a really fun reveal with the wall dropping on you, especially like the tight FOV of a first-person game. If you're looking right at it, it's hard to tell, is the wall lowering or am I rising? But it's you step into the space and you think you've got full cover, and then it exposes and it turns into this bigger arena where the hit scanners become a much higher priority. It's a fun way of messing with kind of the starting priority and shifting it through dynamic geo. But yeah, I could have gone through this door here, beaten this fight, and seen exit. But this platform that I'm standing on right now wouldn't have been raised, so I couldn't have made it across to the exit. And you can see this structure bears some resemblance to what was in the previous level's exit. It's not as grandiose, and the visual detailing just isn't as strong. But there's the symmetry, there's the staircase across to a platform, there's kind of the pocket spaces off to the side. But the gold door here again is kind of a weird shortcut. But I think the reasoning on that, or at least my reasoning when replaying this, has been that if I get to this space and I'm thinking I need to get this exit, what do I need to do here to get to the exit? This isn't a gold key platform, right? So, like, where is the magic button that's going to trigger that? That could be anywhere. And when I come back to this room, having hit a dead end, I would see the gold key over there, and I'd see the gold key door, and maybe then I would see the button and think, aha, that's the set of steps I need to do. Or at the very least, the gold key is it becomes a goal to reinforce I need to explore that area. So I think it's kind of a lure in that way to draw the player attention. Okay, so now this one is my favorite, I think, of the whole first episode here. Just right off the bat, I like that we've got this vat of toxin. Like I'm going to almost certainly take damage crossing it. And now I've kind of hard committed to this corner that I'm at, and this kind of precarious ledge, and I've got enemies pushing me already. And now what the hell's this thing pushing me from down the hallway? Ah! Yes, that's a really fun introduction to the Spectrized Demon. You turn this corner, I see a couple of the enemies that I've already become familiar with, imps, former humans, shotgunners. But then all the way down this dark, scary hallway, I've got this shape moving towards me. And even if I prioritize that and start shooting at it first, which would be the wrong move, um, I've got all these other ones to deal with, and it's going to take him a long time to get here. And he's got a lot of health. So um, I think, I think like the Half-Life mindset would be that each time you introduce a new enemy, you want to introduce them in isolation or like just one enemy of that type, so the player can recognize it and learn what it's capable of and start forming tactics around it. In this case, the Spectrized Pinky, it's not really that new of an enemy. It's just kind of a different flavor of the Pinky. Um, but also, like, I probably will have dealt with these other guys by the time the Pinky gets to me, um, which means I'm now dealing with it in isolation. But again, just thinking about level geometry as kind of a timer, um, distance is time. Having that enemy farther away and a slightly offset path um, means it's going to take longer for it to get to me. Um, yeah, but I do think this leads to some really fun choices as well. I think this is where the level design starts getting a bit more mysterious. Like we already saw with the previous level, you've got the big choices at the start that all kind of look the same at first. They all lead to different spaces and do different things. Um, and here they're a little bit better differentiated. I've got a door, I've got a staircase, I've got a door way down the scary hallway where this monster came from. Um, but like I don't have a clear goal yet of here's the door I need to unlock or here's the exit somewhere. So I just kind of have to go exploring. So horseshoe shape uh, works really well as a again kind of a leash for these enemies, or if they do eventually make their way around the corner, it's a very long path. Um, Means it'll take them a long time, and basically lets me set my pace with the fight. And also, like if I want to deal with these guys, I probably need to push up a bit. Okay, so I've seen my first door. I need a gold key to open it. And I do hear some monsters behind the walls. Yes, now this is kind of a fun setup where I've got this massive room full of toxin, and I see kind of this balcony platform off to the side. So that leaves the scary hallway, and now that has kind of an invisible trigger that raises up this platform. I think in this case, it probably would have been better to have like a button I have to push here to feel like it's a more deliberate action that has triggered this. Um, and also that way, if I'd gone up to this platform and looked down at the balcony, um, I have no reason to assume that going to that balcony is going to raise this bridge. The only thing I can assume is that it's kind of the last place I've explored, so I better go explore it. But if I saw a button here, and I guess the angle on it isn't great for that, but if I saw a button that I think would help with thinking, I should go check that out and interact with it. So here are a couple interesting cases of like, what are these monsters doing? Like, what if this hallway had been empty? It would have been a lot faster to like just path through the space, run around the corner, get the key, run back, and it would have been kind of thoughtless, or I wouldn't have spent the time to appreciate the space. And monsters are a good way of slowing me down, helping me take a little bit more time to appreciate the space that I'm in. And also, like that's true even if the monsters aren't really a threat. So like having a pinky on the other side of this ledge, it can't get to me. It can't hurt me, unless I'm like sticking my face right up into it. Um, it's like, what is it doing? Um, I think, in true 3D FPS games, often you'll have a case of like being up on a ledge and enemies down below, and you get some grenades that can throw down on them. Like that's just kind of a fun, empowering moment. And I think there's kind of a version of that with these kind of window fights. We're going to see another one in E1M7, um, where it's just kind of empowering, these kind of shooting gallery moments. But another possible reason for this would be that the pinky is kind of a meat wall, and I've got these hit scanners around it. And as a meat wall, he's basically creating dynamic cover for for the hit scanners. That I have to think about, how am I target prioritizing, um, and like, do I need to take down this meat wall, or can I get him to infight? Um, it makes it a little bit more variable from playthrough to playthrough. But cool. Now I've got the gold key. It's also possible I could have gotten the gold key before seeing the gold door, but like they're close enough that it's not a big deal. I think Doom trusts the player to explore. I think more modern level design tendencies don't trust the player as much. And also, like from doing Quake modding, I know that like there are maybe some good reasons for not not always trusting the player as much. Um, you know, Doom I think is very willing to throw a player into the deep end. But like here we've got another one of the platforms that I think I mentioned in E1M3, maybe it was E1M2. But it kind of drops the player into the pit. In this fight here, I really like this fight coming up. So curved walls, kind of soft threshold into the space, and I've got big ambush, big scary ambush, where I am totally surrounded, lots of enemies. And what I really like about this is it creates this, I have to make a decision ASAP. I'm about to turn this corner. I don't know what's ahead. I don't know how many enemies there are waiting for me. And now I've got this big ambush of enemies behind, and that's a known thing, but it's also more than I can deal with all at once. That's a lot of hit scanners, right? So do I push forward? And that's kind of like a out of the frying pan into the fire moment. Especially as I learned there's a second ambush over here that's also coming around the corner. Um, and it's just throwing everything at the player, and asking them to adapt. And like if I had pushed all the way through here and seen like, hey, there's a little platform here I can fight from safely, and I pushed the button while I'm still dealing with the previous wave, then that would have been like even more for me to deal with. I do think the awkward thing here though is that the button is critical path. And this is a case of pushing a button and having basically no idea what the button has done. Um, Especially like if I push that button in a fight, I might forget that I pushed the button. And also like with these other moving elements, these pillars, I might think like, oh, all it did was lower the pillars. Um, in which case, it's still a question of like, okay, well, what does this room do for me? What did I get out of this? I've got these other pillars off to the side. This leads to a secret area. So it's kind of a lot to take in. It's kind of a lot of red herrings. But yeah, since I pushed that button, eventually I will leave this space, either by that path or through the secret. Um, and that opens up this new route here. The interesting thing is that there's a key on the other side of this window. I'm not sure if it's because of the source port that I'm playing on or if it's like that in the DOS version as well, but it's kind of unfortunate I can't see the key from down here. I think that would help with setting a goal of like, ooh, there's something I want to get. Because right now I can't, like it might just be a window. But it's nice returning to this space that we were previously like on the other side of. Again, this is a case where symmetry, I think, helps with creating landmarks. You've got the two different candelabras that really stand out as a thing. I guess like even if you had one, that would probably stand out. Um, but like it's pretty easy to tell. Oh, I was on the other side of this. It also means like, hey, if you grabbed the yellow key earlier and just ran away from these guys, now you've got to fight them head on, and that's going to be very different. In fact, like they might spill out into this arena and create a very different fight than the one that I've just had. So this is kind of fun. Like it's kind of a subversion. Normally, when you push a button, uh, the button is just part of the wall and it's stationary. But in this case, the button is a door that's opened up this dark and scary secret path with this kind of dingy metal or concrete or whatever this is. And it feels like I'm crawling into the gut work of, here's this big computer. Now I'm crawling into the guts of it. Um, I think like that's thematically very nice. One thing that's interesting here though is that like again, what are these enemies doing? What is this fight? It's basically just a hallway. I've got a little bit of cover I can duck behind, so it's not like a raw DPS fight, but they're basically coming at me single file. It's not a very compelling like from encounter design perspective. This isn't an encounter, or like it's not a good encounter. But again, from the perspective of like ecosystems or like cleaning up or like Pac-Man, um, this it slows my roll and it confirms like, hey, this looks scary. Hey, it is scary. As they're enemies, but they're single file. I can't quite tell how many of them there are. Um, and also like it slows my roll. Like if this was empty and I just ran through this, it'd be like, oh, it's not scary. Okay. But yeah, like here, I can't even see these guys. Again, not much of an encounter from like a pure kind of challenge encounter design perspective. Like this isn't, unless I'm basically out of ammo, this isn't going to pose a challenge to the player. Um, it's just going to slow them down, and I think that helps with regulating the pace. Um, like not all fights have to be challenging. Some fights can be about reinforcing the identity of the space, reinforcing the theme. Um, they can be kind of punctuations on silence. Okay, so another case of pushing a button and not having clear feedback of what it does. We can kind of infer at this point that, oh, this door opened. Although, like, we may not remember if this, like, maybe this was always open and we just hadn't noticed. But yeah, that's kind of the problem of the button interactions. ideally, you'd be able to see directly what the button is affecting. Another option is just slow it down, right? Like if I push the button and I hear like a slow grinding thing over here, then I can probably reach it in time and see that it's still moving and then retroactively infer, oh, this is moving because I did that. Um, versus like it just being open and like, huh, okay, is that, or maybe, huh, maybe the blue key is what opened it, right? Okay, so now I absolutely love this encounter here. Yeah, that's such a good encounter. Like it this is like a good set piece. This is like as opposed to those hallway fights where it's just kind of filler and like setting the pace and setting the tone. Um, this is like strap in because you're gonna have a challenge here. And like all these little angles mean like it's a lot of stuff to clear, a lot of uncertainty as you're moving through the space, and that means you've got these pockets of darkness with the pulsing lights. Yeah, it's just a really tense one to move through, and then you've got the specterized pinkies, which are even harder to see even when the lights are full. Um, yeah, so I just really love this kind of set piece. Yeah, so you can see this hook here. The hook shape means that even if if I can find my way back to it, looks like there's maybe another one here. Yes, there's another hook here as well. Um, that one's probably harder to catch enemies in. But that means even if I opened this door and said, oh hell no, and just backed out and tried to fight them from the door, the enemies would get caught in the hook. Um, their pathfinding isn't true like A star or like extra pathfinding. It's trying to just move towards the player and then randomly nudge side to side a little bit. And hook shapes like this, if I can get back to it, mean that the enemy is trying to path to me toward the door, and it's just going to stay, unless the randomness pushes it really far to the side, it's going to stay in here until I try and clear this corner or this corner over here, which means I have to move into the space to fight these enemies. I can't fight it from the door. There's a similar thing over here. It's not a full hook, um, but it still would effectively slow them down. You can see, like maybe the mini map makes this clearer. Yeah, or the auto map. Like if this enemy is trying to path towards the blue door, he's going to be stuck, or it is going to be stuck in this corner here, trying to get to me. And the randomness is going to have to go really wide for it to actually get around and be able to reach the door. Um, so like if I want to fight from the door, they just aren't going to come to me. Maybe one or two, but not the majority of them. So I have to push into the space. I have to clear these corners to have this fight. And I really love that. One other thing, so on Ultraviolence, I'm pretty sure if I open this door, there are one or two more spectrized pinkies here. So like if I'm just like panicking and trying to get through the space and I open this, I've just made it harder for myself. And I really appreciate that as kind of a joke on the player. Um, but one thing I love about this level is that it has a clear thing it's about. Um, this level is about the spectrized pinkies. And it's doing other stuff too, but it introduces the spectrized pinky at the start as one of the first enemies that we face. Has a couple more seeded throughout that we encounter, mixed in different kind of compositions of former humans and shotgunners and imps. And we get this final encounter that is just 100% showing off the Spectrized Pinky in its most gruesome and terrifying. I love it. And also the music, like the tension of the music, really, really helps. Oh boy, I spent way too long on that one. Okay, so I think this one I don't like quite as much, so I'm probably not going to spend as long. So we've got a red key door. I'm going to hold off on that room just yet. Yes, there's a good example of the Pinky behaving as that kind of meat shield against the shotgunner, which again can create for some really interesting dynamics of target priority. Yes, this is interesting. We've got this symmetrical 3 doors that are all yellow key doors, left, right, and center. And then we've got a blue key door. So we've seen all 3 doors. Yes, this here is actually a pretty good little encounter, I think. The toxin does damage to the player, unless I have a biosuit, or I forget what it's called in Doom. So I don't want to step in the toxin, and that limits the amount of space that I can use when I'm avoiding these guys. And then when I go over here, I trip an invisible trigger that opens up this space and lets these monsters out. And I have this choice of like pushing back here, trying to get away from them, or staying back here and taking them one by one, which would be kind of boring. But they can cross the toxin without any problem, which means they've got more options than I do. And there are also the imps up here that are leashed, and that poses kind of a different flavor of threat from what the imp and shotgunners are doing. So again, really dynamic. If the imp decides to go a different path one time, that's going to make a very different play experience from if it takes a different path, because if it takes the lead and the shotgunners are behind it, then I can probably prioritize the imps or shoot at the Pinky. But if the Pinky's in the back and the shotgunners are in front, then they're probably the highest priority. Or like I might want to deliberately move out in a way so that the Pinky is blocking their shots. But here at this point, we've seen the biosuit in one of the earlier levels. I believe it was E1M4. I could intentionally take a little damage crossing this slime to get that, and then be able to use that to explore some different pockets of the map. And I think it's something I haven't talked about yet, but something that Doom's really good at is creating these kind of teases like this, like, ooh, what's over there? I see like one of those little health globe potion things. But knowing like I'm going to take damage if I go over there. But now if I have the suit, I could go there for free. So it's kind of these little temptations to go explore. Now this is a fun space. I really like the encounter here. So once I grab that key, opens up a bunch of doors, and it slams the door shut behind me. So now the thing here I'm not totally certain on is if the door is on a timer, or if the door is on numbers of enemies killed. I tried timing it the other day to see if that's what it was, Um, but I couldn't be certain because there's monster infighting. Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think like locking the player in the room, um, especially on higher difficulties where you've got a lot more monsters in this space, um, this this can be really overwhelming, especially like if you haven't cleared all the explosive barrels yet. There's the tension of accidentally blowing yourself up, or the barrels getting hit by the enemies, and will you get caught in those chain reactions? And also like you've got these two kind of cover walls, and they're separated in a nice way where you can move between them and kind of clear the angles around them. That feels really nice. I of course played from the entrance, which is like probably the most boring way you could play. Um, but like the reason that they close off the door here is to solve the door problem, right? Like if probably in some playtesting they had a reaction where this massive ambush happened. They said, "Oh no, I'm just going to get out of here," and they went all the way back here and just fought them single file, one by one, which would be like the most boring way to possibly play it. I think ideally, if I'm fighting from back here, there needs to be enough close combat pressure, probably with pinkies, that staying back here isn't worth it. If I stay back here, I'm going to get surrounded and trapped and die. Like the optimal strategy should be to stay mobile in this space. But because the enemy composition here is a lot of shotgunners, it's maybe that math doesn't quite work out. Maybe it's actually better to like hunker down in a corner and fight them one by one. But yeah, it's a tricky balance. I think like the fun way of playing it is of course being more mobile. But yeah, right. I said I wasn't going to talk as much about this one, but here we're rambling a bit. Cool. So we got the gold key or red key. This is another case of symmetry. In this case, it's on 45, which is kind of fun. And also, we've got this ambush. This is kind of a fun one, where if I'd ran straight for the blue key and hadn't noticed that this monster closet opened up behind me, I might turn around and see this pinky right next to me, chasing me, and I might run off this ledge into the toxin, and then there's this whole space for me to explore to try and get back to the rest of the map. And I'm not going to show the off on this one, but it's there if you want to explore it. Okay, so now this space is weird. This reminds me a whole lot of like Zelda 1, like one-room dungeons. I think the interesting thing here is, again, like limiting the player's space onto these kind of narrow catwalks makes the imps a whole lot more threatening because it's a lot harder to dodge their attacks. But like it's a weird repetition. It almost feels like the Lost Forest or something, where it's like, where's the goal? What am I doing here? We've got this case of like armor shards that are poking or pointing at this wall, which gets me an auto map, which fills out all the spaces and helps me see where I have and haven't been. But like that doesn't solve the what's my goal issue. The actual goal, or like the critical path here, is again kind of a unfortunate button on the wall. That like, what did that even do? I've no idea. But with the help of the auto map, and also like it's a pretty conspicuous like set of steel trims on this one. And with auto map, I would tell like, oh, there's a door here that needs to be opened somehow. So I could piece those things together. But you can see like compared to the first couple maps, this is really asking a whole lot of the player. Also, interesting thing here is that the gold key was just on the other side of this window. This is another case where, unfortunately, when we were down on that ledge, we couldn't see it, and I wish we could. because I think that would help a whole lot with seeing that and forming a goal of like, ooh, I want to get up there, rather than just seeing a window with some imps in it. But here we have an ambush. And you can see, like, even though this is basically a hallway fight, like it's a very kind of boring gameplay space in terms of like the level geo shapes. The enemies are doing so much of the work to create interesting encounters because, again, imagine if those pinkies hadn't taken the lead there and the shotgunners had instead taken the lead, that would have played totally different. So it's a very dynamic kind of fighting that can emerge just from these very simple pieces of the pinkies, the shotgunners, the imps. Throw 3 of those into a room and you get different fights each time. Okay, so I've got the gold key, so now I can go through one of the 3 symmetrical doors. Which takes me up to this symmetrical room. And again, you can see it's not quite like hooks of the angles, but these corners, again, behave kind of like traps. So like if I peek around here and I alert these guys, they're going to start pathing towards me. So I run around here, and now they're still pathing towards me and they're going into that corner. So now I go over here and I've got some new enemies to fight. They're still pathing towards me over there, but they can't get to me yet. So it kind of isolates the fight into these 2 separate quadrants that I have to take one by one. You know, if this space was built differently, like if this was just a big curve, then they could all easily group up and collect together as like a single horde of monsters that I'd have to fight. And that would have a very different feeling to it. It wouldn't necessarily be like a worse feeling, it would just be different. Okay, so now here we've got a door, it's flashing, looks very important. But interacting with it does nothing. So unfortunately at this point we have all the keys. So as far as goals go, it's like, is that important? Is it not important? It's kind of hard to tell. So we've got another case of pushing a button and not knowing for sure what it's done. But thankfully, like it's a quick dead end. We loop back, and right away we've got enemies. The enemies, at the very least, will draw our attention to this new path. But of course, if we didn't notice that path previously, we might not realize that it had opened. We might just assume it had always been open, and then again, we'd still be wondering, what did that button do? So this is another case here of out of the frying pan into the fire, where I've got a lot of monsters in this room, and on ultraviolence, it's a really overwhelming number of monsters. And if I'm panicking and thinking like, oh, I just need to get the exit's got to be on the other side of this, I might, deliberately avoid those guys, try and get to this button. And I've made my problem a lot harder. And if I see that happen, I think, oh my god, it can't get any worse than that. And I push the button. Now I've added even more. So I think there are a couple ways of thinking about this. One of them is that the game is punishing the player if they go too fast. Another way is that if the player wants to go fast, they're opting into challenge. I think those are kind of two sides of the same coin. Another thing though is like, what creates a difficult combat encounter in Doom? Where does difficulty come from? And I think in most cases it's depriving the player of options, and usually that means the footwork. Like if I come through this door and I see all these monsters and I back into this corner and I get two pinkies in my face, I'm out of options. My only option remaining is to win the DPS race, right? Like I've got to, hopefully I've still got a chain gun, um, and I've got to burn through them before they burn through me. And with a number of pinkies and like how big the hitbox is on the pinkies, it's really easy to get trapped in here. Really easy, like if I'm in this button area, it's really easy to have them all crowd me in this little tiny corridor. So this room can become real nasty real fast. I think that's interesting. Yeah, I think it's also like maybe kind of a look before you leap, because oh, I'm trying to remember. There's a way to open up the route back. There we go. Yeah, this is another case where the door slams shut behind you, which means you can't just back off and fight from the doors. But like you've got this balcony here, and you can, you don't have the pitch, so you can't look down and just shoot all these guys, but you can gain some information before you go in. And likewise, you can peek in from this side and see, ooh, okay, got some information. Don't want to commit just yet. Maybe I can lead that first group off and use this barrel. And then come back around to this side and then commit to the fight and do it like piece by piece. Yeah, I think like the one downside here is that even though I've played this room countless times, I do too often end up in fighting in this corner, even though I know better, right? I know I shouldn't. And at that point, the fight's already decided for me. Like, if I have the health and I have the ammo, I'm going to win the fight. If I don't have the health or the ammo, I'm going to lose the fight. And there's nothing I can do. There's no like quick movement on my feet or quick thinking that can change my fate at that point. It's locked in. It's pure math. So like, what's the point of this corner? Like, why not just have it be flush? And likewise, why not just have the button on a wall here? I'm not sure. It would create like a very different feeling space. It'd also probably be a lot easier to run in here and push the button right away. Well, I mean, if it's flush against the wall, you just run up and push it. Versus when it's recessed like this, it's more of a, are you sure you want to do that? Yeah, I think I've talked enough about this. I just find that space really interesting to think about. Okay. So now this one's kind of interesting. Like this is absolutely a door fight, but it's a good feeling door fight. The door's wide, so the enemies are able to approach from a lot of different angles. And I've got these barrels up close that make me hesitant to push up. It also means with the pinky kind of front center, I might want to try and kite it to me so that it's blocking more of the shots. Ends up being like a kind of dynamic shooting gallery where I don't really want to leave this box until I've cleared out enough of it. All right, so we've got, again, very symmetrical kind of space that I think works pretty well as a landmark. We've got a gold door. We've got one of those, ooh, I really want those ultra spheres or mega spheres. That's what I'm thinking of. Red door over here. And this is kind of like the biggest, in terms of like a hub spoke structure, this is the biggest hub structure that we've seen so far. We have to do a lot of exploring before we find this corner over here. And get the gold key. I do think a nice thing about this is the windows, and be able to look out and see, okay, so our long-term goal is over there. I can see the exit. And again, like lower resolution CRT screens, you wouldn't be able to tell. All you'd be able to tell is like, oh, there's a flashing light. That's probably important. But as you get closer, you have other opportunities looking out the window to see that and think like, oh, that's where I'm trying to go. So this is kind of a weird one, since you can't aim up and down. But it's also kind of cool because you've got this big computer structure, and this lift takes you up into the guts of the computer. It's like from a combat encounter, I'm a little iffy on this one. It kind of feels awkward with the verticality of it. But from a thematic perspective, riding an elevator up into the guts of a computer is really cool. Just imagining this massive mainframe that's, maybe under maintenance or repair or something, and you're going up into the core. That's sick. And they're creating a lot of that kind of thematic resonance with just, very simple shapes and textures. So it's a pretty cool thing they're doing. Okay, so we've got a blue door that I need. So I mentioned earlier, like there are different mindsets of how enemies are placed. You've got like kind of the encounter design mindset, which is kind of like action RPG, not action RPG, like fighting game, action game. That's what I'm thinking of. It's that kind of mindset. And then you've got more of like kind of a living ecosystem sense of enemy placement. And I think that's, this almost feels like a System Shock level, right? Or like a Bioshock level, where I'm kind of carving through space and exploring a very loopy, interconnected kind of living space. And the nature of the sort of lock and key progression here is that I'm going to end up looping through the space multiple times with more and more enemies reinforcing. A couple other thoughts here is that the lift here is again behaving kind of as a solution to the door problem, where riding the lift up forces us into this combat encounter in close combat against the Pinky. Again, I think the lifts feel kind of awkward, like it's an awkward way of doing it, but like it's more successful than a door. If it was a door, I could just back off. When it's a lift, I feel like I kind of need to commit to the fight, even though it puts me at suboptimal combat ranges for fighting the Pinky. Other thing here, though, is that I got the red key. I see a blue key down there. I see the door. And if I can piece one and one together, I know that door is a red key door. So now I know, hey, now I can get access to the blue key. So now I've got to basically backtrack. Backtrack through the hub. Now I've got these new rooms that are opened up. And they opened up a while ago, and the enemies have been let to patrol. So again, this is going to be very dynamic. Each time I play this, the enemies are going to be in different locations and different kind of arrangements. It's level design that's really trusting the enemy design to be able to stand up in a ton of different circumstances. Now we've got the blue key, and even more of these doors have opened up and let out even more patrols of monsters. So again, it's like a living ecosystem. They just they just keep coming and keep showing up, and in a way, it's like I can't fully clean the space. This is a map that I can't conquer. Of course, I can eventually. It just it's a lot more involved. It takes a lot more work. Um, it's if this is dust that's resistant to dusting, this is some very, very resistant dust. Or it's like, I don't know, you vacuumed your room and then you lift up the rug, and in the process of doing that, it gets dust all over the place because the rug needs shaken out or something, and now you've got to vacuum again. It's that kind of very intense cleaning process. Oh, so a fun thing that's going to happen here. Well, first thing, I see the exit. I see the exit button. Cool. I see a door. I need to do something with the door. I've got all the keys. It's not a key door, so there must be a button here somewhere. But then we've got this where there were a couple of imps on the other side throwing fireballs at me. And this is kind of inversion or like a reversal where there's a power position behind this kind of fortified window. And now, in a moment, I'm going to be able to use that same fortified position against enemies coming toward me. So it's like a turret set piece is a very, very common, like more mainstream version of the same thing. Like Half-Life 2 and Root Canal, you get one of these. Or in Quake 1, the Tim Willits level, you have I want to say it's E1M3, where you have the ogre kind of above and behind you launching grenades down, and then you get up onto the platform and you can push a button to open up some coffins that let out more zombies, and now you can kind of role play as the ogre and launch grenades down on them. It's just a nice reversal of posing a challenge and then letting you use that challenge against your enemies. But yeah, like that's a massive level, and like I'm not sure if there's a way for me to pan this, but there are sections of the map that we didn't even explore. The critical path is like back and forth and back and forth, and each time we pass through the space, it opens up more monster closets, and it's a really interesting approach to kind of encounter design, level design, enemy placement. It's a lot more like kind of immersive sim thinking than like action game thinking. Okay, so we're on the last level of this episode. This is a Sandy Peterson level. I'm not sure if it started as a Tom Hall level. I'm pretty sure it's just a Sandy Peterson level. But we've got a ton of pinkies. We've got a ton of explosive barrels. Well, we should know by now what the barrels do when they're clustered together. But like, it doesn't stop it from being fun. Like, there's kind of a fun anticipation, like looking at dominoes and just like, ooh, I'm gonna push the domino and see them all fall down. There's something fun about it, and I don't know why. I think part of it also on this one is you've got kind of a mini game, right? Like it's like billiards trying to get as many of the balls into the pockets from the initial split. Like I've got all these pinkies as the billiard balls, and I've got the barrels as my cue ball, I guess. And trying to, it's possible to wipe them all out from the explosions. A lot of it's just luck of how the enemy placement is. But like it's just kind of fun. It's like pachinko or something. It's a fun little mini game that plays out a bit differently every time. So now this is interesting. We've got kind of a non-secret here of the auto map, which reveals the whole map and reveals it to be a pretty small thing. So interesting thing here is that both these rooms have kind of pocket corners like this. So, I mean, I guess all corners are kind of pockets and all pockets are corners. But, I step out, I hear enemies get alerted on both sides. If I step back, again, they'll try and path towards me. So they'll be pathing into this corner. They won't be leaving the room, um, which means I have to push back out this way to start to engage them, which again, with them pathing towards me, it lets them start to push back out. So really the only way to take the fight is in a vulnerable way, unless I can manage to pull one out without pulling the other and then pull back and isolate the fight into two separate fights. Um, I'm not sure like how deliberate that is because like if I'm trying to think from the monster's perspective, the monsters are thinking, oh, there's food. I'm hungry. I'm gonna go chase this guy down, and then they're kind of showing their um, how unintelligent they are by just pathing into a corner and being stuck. It's this kind of conflict between my perception of the monster's intentionality and what they're actually doing. But from just like a pure combat perspective, I think it's a nice tool in the toolkit to, like if this was a flat wall here and they could just easily slide out and chase me, then, I just run back and fight from the door. And that'd be a lot less interesting, right? Much more interesting if they're kind of waiting to ambush me like that. Especially like, if I was really aggressive and rushed through here, um, then I've got both of them chasing me. And, which one's going to get to me first? Which one do I prioritize? That's a little bit more interesting than, again, fighting from a door. Having the door potentially close shut and isolate the fight even further. Alright, so here we get our introduction to the Barons of Hell. Alright, so again, I'm playing on Hurt Me Plenty, which is kind of normal difficulty. And that means that, um, they're introducing a new enemy in this fight. So introducing it in isolation, it's only the one enemy type. We don't see this enemy mixed in with other enemies simultaneously. I think it's a good way of letting me as a player figure out like what can this enemy do, what do I need to worry about, what are its attacks. Also, like just getting an impression of how much health it has. All that stuff I think is good. On harder difficulties where I think they're assuming that you've already played through on Hurt Me Plenty or an easier difficulty. You also have a bunch of specterized pinkies around this space, which really messes up the target priority and makes this space a lot scarier because before the walls come down, it's really easy to get trapped in these corners, especially with explosive barrels, and then a Baron projectile hits that and you're toast. But very easy for the specterized pinkies to trap you. And that removes your options. And again, like how do you make Doom levels hard? You take away options from the player. So here, when it's two Barons, and I've got plenty of space to move around, I don't have to worry about the pinkies. It's not that hard. Not that hard, again, with the assumption that I've been playing Doom for many years, and I'm very comfortable with the controls. If I was a new player and it was 1993, that wouldn't be the case. Cool. One other thing about this that I really like is when the wall comes down, it's another of those cases where I can't tell if the platform and the ceiling I'm on, like, are we rising up or is it the wall coming down? It's really hard to tell with that without more frame of reference, and I find that really a really fun kind of illusion. Um, yeah, that's about gonna do it here. We've got the final little exit here, which I think is like such a little flavorful bit of storytelling and kind of a cliffhanger. Um, yeah, so going into going into hell there and just all the monsters. Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for this playthrough. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff I didn't cover. There are tons of secrets and all sorts of things for you to find on your own, and also like for other videos to cover. My main focus was trying to get at some of the encounter design stuff, some of the like what it's doing with its monster placement, um, and yeah, just trying to provide some different perspectives. Of course, like this episode of Doom is kind of famous among level designers as like good examples of level design. Um, so hopefully, I was able to provide some different perspectives that, yeah, hopefully it's given you something to think about. And I think that'll do it. Thanks for watching.